Excalibur by Ronald Hubbard, Chapter 1, The Lost Key. Once upon a time, according to a writer in the Arabian Nights, there lived a very wise old man, and wise he must have been, who made it the work of his life to collect all the wisdom in the world. He wrote an enormous and learned volume setting forth everything he had found, and at last sat back with contentment, a task well done. I'm Ed Marsh, curator of this Marsh Library. It's located in San Diego, California, actually just north in Escondido. Within a few months, I will be moving and taking the library along with me to south of the border, into Mexico. So I wanted to have this final state of the library recorded, to hand it along and show what once was. This is a collection of collections, a library of collections of the works of great men and women in the fields of the golden age of science fiction and the golden age of philosophy, including art, literature, letters, photographs, objects, and such. The central figure of Marsh Library is a man named L. Ron Hubbard. When I became a fan of L. Ron Hubbard and his philosophy and techniques of Dianetics, and later in Scientology, I found out he wrote fiction. And I found out who his friends were. And it so happened that his friends also wrote fiction. And they were the same individuals I read as a teenager. Bob Heinlein, Asimov, Bradbury. Just a whole new world opened up to me. Later on in life, as I accumulated funds and decided to begin collecting, they were my go-to guys. I've got to have Fahrenheit 451. I've got to have Final Blackout. I've got to have Foundation. I got to have Martian Chronicles, Stranger in a Strange Land, Puppet Master, Starship Troopers, all the greats. So since I've just collected everything in the sci-fi genre of these men. One of Hubbard's favorite typewriters used in the 30s was the Remington Noiseless. This one is great for a traveling man like Hubbard in those days. He was typing scripts for Columbia Pictures and, of course, the short stories and manuscripts for Street and Smith publications, pulps. What you see is a piece of his letterhead which he would make by hand using a stamp that he would roll in an ink pad and roll it at the top of his manuscript. The charging cavalryman with saber outstretched really conveyed the spirit of his writings. It's not known he wrote many westerns, some of which were performed on NBC television, as well as fantasy and adventure stories, and even a few romance stories. Over to the right, you may notice two little busts also. The busts are shamefully used as bookends to those books. On the left, you have the artist's agent, Forrest Ackerman, and to the right, the author, L. Ron Hubbard. Both of those were commissioned by the library and executed by Ann Fuel. The books they hold up are a series called The Plot Genie, and they were to give writers with writer's block an out. And it would list out 100 different conflicts, 100 different protagonists, different situations, way a love interest can conclude. One I uncovered recently is how to write a script, and that's from the early 1910s, how to write a movie script. Behind me here are the works, Pulp Fiction works of L. Ron Hubbard, and this is one of my very favorite issues from Astounding Science Fiction. This is the first of a serial of 3 entitled Final Blackout. And I recall that even Robert Heinlein, another famous author, said this is one of the finest science fiction tales ever told. Look at the lurid colors. This is from April 1940. This cost 20 cents when it was published. And it's about advanced world war on Earth and how Earth has degraded. I love these works, and this is what the pulps actually looked like when they hit the newsstands. And the newsstands were on the corners, street corners in cities. And a lot of people would wait in line for that first issue coming out for the month. This one, 20 cents. The preservation case for a book or a movie prop or a valuable is a real art. And I stick to H&H Book Services up in Glendale, California. Third generation Armenian artists. They work with leather only, and they've done all the props for Pirates of the Caribbean, the book, and so on and so forth. Here we are in the Golden Age room of Marsh Library, and here are collected the early signed works of the masters of the Golden Age. We have Papa Ernest Hemingway there. Never really wrote science fiction, but I adore his fiction, so he's collected. A.E. Van Vogt, the author of Slan, The World of Null A. The great John W. Campbell in the red clamshells there, who wrote Who Goes There?, which became the thing, and he was really the finest editor of science fiction and brought along other writers like Hubbard, like Heinlein, like Asimov, like Van Vogt. Beneath is a little collection of famous monsters of Filmland magazine of the great Forrest J. Ackerman. I adore those. Most of them are signed, and they remind me of my childhood. In the blue clamshells, we have the marvelous Robert A. Heinlein, who wrote Starship Troopers and all the science fiction for juveniles from the 30s and 40s. Beneath that, a complete edition published by his wife after he had passed away in the brown leather, which releases his letters and new stories. Over here, the great H.G. Wells, complete signed works, marvelous works. Time Machine, War of the Worlds, Invisible Man, Isle of Dr. Moreau, all famous to this day. Beneath him, the grandfather of science fiction from the 19th century, Jules Verne. He wrote in French, and this is nowhere near a complete collection, but selected works in English, first edition. And beyond, in the purple clamshells, the author of the famous Dune political saga, written by the great Frank Herbert. Everything is there signed. Many of them are inscribed to his sons. And then finally, the great E.E. Doc Smith, scientist and galactic storyteller. Battlefield Earth was released in the year 2000. I was concerned about all the criticisms, and I saw it, and I was nonplussed by it initially because it only took a small section of the book, and I had read the book several times. Now I've watched it 25, 30 times, and I take it as a delightful comedy because the antagonist, played by Travolta, did an over-the-top job on an evil son of a gun. For that reason, I now adore the film. What you're looking at now is a rendering of the Cyclo security officer in charge of Earth, Turl, from the book Battlefield Earth, and as portrayed on film by John Travolta. This particular painting was commissioned by the library and executed by the great Christy Arnold. Now we're looking at an original rendering done by Patrick Titoupoulos, who was the art director for the film Battlefield Earth. And this was his concept work done for the makeup crew and the costumers of what Turl looked like in his mind. And then we have also by Titoupoulos an original piece entitled Battlefield Earth, and this shows the orders of magnitude of size of the two different races' bodies, the Cyclos and the humans, or man-animals as the Cyclos called them. These are the complete signed works of Sir Winston S. Churchill, in my estimation, the savior of the free world. Particularly proud of Man Overboard there, an 1898 first publication of his work, and ending here with the history of the English-speaking people here, which were signed to his personal valet. I adore this man. I listen to his speeches whenever possible. The secret session speeches, which are located up there, which were only declassified a couple of decades ago, are frightening. They revealed the precarious state of his country when he took over. Coming down from Churchill, we have the signed works of Mr. Will Durant. The earliest piece here is Philosophy and the Social Problem, published 1917. The most famous series here, written by him and his wife, is The Story of Civilization. And the book Dianetics, Modern Science Mental Health, was dedicated to that man by Ron Hubbard, a particular honor. Here we have a bas-relief, a piece of art done in 3 dimensions. It's entitled The Magician, which is the name of that vessel, which was a 39-foot metal sloop that L. Ron Hubbard took up to rechart the Pacific coastline on behalf of the U.S. Hydrographic Agency and the Explorers Club. This is a small collection of early works of Americana. This piece is the first American dictionary ever produced by Isaiah Thomas, 1796. These are by Elbert Hubbard, and there's one in particular entitled The Book of Business, which I learned a great deal about business from. These are the works of Elbert Hubbard. They are the complete works, and each volume is signed. He actually made his own paper, watermarked. This book is 100 years old, and as you will see from the inks, which he mixed personally, they have held beautifully over the last 100 years, especially when compared to the inkwell fountain pen ink he used, which has faded dramatically over the years. I adore his works. He went down on the Lusitania in 1915 at the beginning of America's inclusion in World War I. He and his wife. He gave up his and his wife's seats on the lifeboat for children. In my estimation, this is the finest rendering in 3D of L. Ron Hubbard, author. The title of this piece is The Pulpster, and this was done by the great Anne Fuel. She spent an awful lot of time on this. It's marble resin and painted on top, which I don't normally like in a statue, but this one is true to form. Circa 1938, L. Ron Hubbard, dashing, dapper, a ladies' man, and a high production pulp writer.